Hey everyone! Welcome to Manhwa Heartbeats. Today, we're recapping the story called High Society. If you love epic romance recaps, you're in the right place. Please make sure to hit that subscribe button. It helps us a whole lot and keeps you up to date with our latest recaps. Sit back and enjoy. Before heaven and earth are even made, there's an endless ocean and a single island called Santnar. This place is ruled by a goddess, who's all about beauty and charm in every way you can imagine. At night, Santnar turns into a place where luxury and cunning shine bright like stars. But even here, there's a trashy spot where all the filth collects, a slum called Kimora. In this dirty part of Santnar, everyone calls Adele a little rat, making it clear she shouldn't even think about running away. They already know everything, and there's no escape for her. Abel calls out to Adele, asking her to prove she isn't mute. She snaps back, telling them not to touch her. One of them moves in closer, confirming she's actually a woman. She shouts at them to back off and breaks a bottle, trying to scare them away. But one of them grabs her and pins her against the wall. He tells her he took her in out of pity, because she's an orphan, but she never appreciated it. He's upset because she shines shoes just to get by, and he tried to go easy on her, but it's getting harder to do that. Then, he hits her with his elbow, telling her she has a week to come up with the protection money. If she doesn't, he warns her that she'll be dealing with him directly instead of just polishing shoes. A few days later, in Piazza San Celina, Adele is busy cleaning the shoes of two men. Her mind is racing with thoughts about what she's going to do since there are only 2 days left to find the money. She's worried about what might happen if she can't pay up and ends up getting dragged into something worse. As she's lost in thought, Cesare Bunapart, the man whose shoes she's shining, complains that he'd rather die than have to hold hands with Lucrezia before walking into the dining hall. Adele listens, but she can't help thinking that avoiding Lucrezia isn't nearly as impossible as finding the money she needs. The paper Cesare is holding is the Daily Santnar *, and the headline reads about him, calling him the brightest star among the great nobles of Santnar, and the main character in countless love stories. It announces that Cesare Bunapart has finally found his destined partner, Lucrezia della Vale, the youngest daughter of the della Vale family. Their marriage is based on an old agreement between their families, and with Lucrezia naming Cesare as the sole heir to Borgia, the news has captured everyone's attention. The aristocrats are all congratulating Lucrezia, celebrating that her long-time unrequited love has finally come to fruition. Cesare, hearing their praises, comments that they sure know how to talk. Jude, who's sitting beside him, isn't convinced, though. He says he won't be fooled, because he knows what kind of woman Lucrezia really is. Meanwhile, Adele just now realizes who Cesare is. She never imagined she'd run into someone so important in Piazza San Celina. She starts to think about telling him her situation, hoping he might take pity on her and toss her a few gold coins. Cesare is determined to stick to his plan, but Jude thinks the idea is completely crazy and questions whether Cesare is serious about going through with it. Cesare then asks if Jude has a better plan, and Jude suggests they find a good girl and sell her to the della Vale family. At that moment, Adele's mind races, and she thinks maybe she can get more than just a few gold coins out of this. Maybe it's a sign from God, giving her one last shot. She suddenly pleads with them, begging them to take her, convinced she could become the most expensive lady in all of Santnar. One of the men looks at her, confused, and asks what she's talking about. Cesare, surprised by her outburst, questions whether a shoe shiner can't tell the difference between shoes and people anymore, and firmly adds that he's not a pimp. Adele, undeterred, responds that she hasn't said anything wrong. She introduces herself as Abel but quickly corrects herself, saying her name is Adele Vivi. She tells them she can be whoever her master wants her to be and insists she can do better than anyone else. Cesare, intrigued but skeptical, questions her confidence, asking how she could possibly know what he wants. Adele boldly replies that she'll marry into the Delaveil family instead of him, pointing out that what he really needs is a fake daughter of the Bunapart family. When he asks where she got that idea, she casually says she figured it out after reading the newspaper. She goes on to explain that in the marriage contract announced by the Delaveil family, only the family name is mentioned. It hasn't been decided who will carry it. So, if he buys a woman and tricks them into believing she's the Bunapart's secret daughter, he could get out of the arranged marriage. As she's explaining, she realizes why it has to be a woman. It's because the Delaveil family has an unmarried son. Adele can't help but think she might be smarter than she ever gave herself credit for. Jude is impressed that Adele figured all this out just from reading a newspaper. Cesare, however, dismisses her idea, saying it's a waste of time, because the Delaveil family has been scholarly for generations. He wouldn't consider giving them a shoe shiner, who can barely read and write. He's clearly judging her based on her appearance, but Adele wants to prove him wrong. She asks what if she can do more than just read and write. Cesare, surprised, asks her to confirm, and she tells him she also knows the Algae language. When he asks where she learned it, she explains she picked it up from books at the public library and by listening to foreigners. Cesare thinks he's being toyed with by the sea goddess. He then says there's nothing he can do about it. No matter how smart she is, she needs to be good-looking if he's going to sell her. He places his shoes on her shoulder and says she's eliminated in the preliminaries. What a harsh way to treat someone. As they start to walk away, Adele calls out to them, asking them to wait. She throws off her cap, peels off the fake, unattractive skin she had stuck to her face, and turns around to face them. She's actually incredibly beautiful. She must have worn that disguise to keep people away. She asks if she's still eliminated now, and questions if she has all the qualifications. She can act, and he should give her a chance. Jude doesn't see the point in Adele pretending to be Cesare's sister. But then he notices that their hair and eye colors are similar, so he thinks it might actually work. He asks Cesare what he thinks. Cesare then asks Adele if she or her parents have any real connection to him. She replies that she doesn't and points out that is asking an orphan about her parents. Cesare, curious, wonders if she's really foolish enough to not know she could be in serious trouble if she gets caught. He asks her why she came to him, and she simply says it's because she's hungry. Despite that, he decides to give her a chance. As he starts to leave, he announces that is Cesare, and is sending her away. Adele responds with a line from Durante's play, saying they are going to the place they both wished for, and asks if they will meet again. Cesare, impressed that she knows the quote, thinks she might be quite useful after all. He tells her he'll be waiting for her at the Bunapart estate until the afternoon. Adele still can't believe that Cesare agreed to her proposal. She's relieved that she won't have to worry about being sold off, but she's upset because she can't talk to her only friend, Clarice, about it. She wants to share the news, but Clarice is too busy right now. Adele has sent her a letter, hoping she'll read it soon. Then, there's a knock on her door. Adele wonders who could be knocking at this late hour. When the door opens, a man stands there and says he knew she would act like this. He's come to check on her because she hasn't paid the protection fee, and he thinks she might be planning to run away. He grabs her by the arm and yells at her to come with him. Adele, panicking, tells him to let go of her. She tries to escape through the window. The man calls her a crazy bitch and questions where she thinks she's going. As she climbs out the window and onto the ledge, she remembers Cesare's warning about getting caught. Even though she's scared, she doesn't care if it means her life is at risk. She just wants to get out of that place and is ready to give up everything for freedom. When Adele finally makes it to the Bunapart estate, she's greeted by Ernest, the butler. He welcomes her warmly, addressing her as Miss Adele. He says they've been waiting for her and asks her to come inside with him. He tells her that the Lord is expecting her, and will be happy to see her. Standing in front of Cesare, Adele looks like a mess. Cesare notices her state and asks why his dear younger sister has arrived looking so wet and disheveled. He tells her to explain what happened. Adele tells him about the old man, named Nino, who runs the shoe cleaning store in Kimora. She explains that Nino kicked her out because she couldn't pay the protection fee. Cesare asks if it was really Nino who did this, and Adele thinks to herself that he's no longer around. Cesare then asks if it's raining heavily right now. Adele tells him that the rain has been pouring so hard that she heard a shack in Kimora collapsed. Because of that collapse, someone in the slum lost their life. Cesare asks if there's anyone else giving her trouble. Adele replies that no one is bothering her at the moment, and she decides to leave it at that. However, she can't shake the feeling that Cesare might know about her friend Clarice. Cesare tells Adele not to worry too much. He says she just needs to make sure the plan goes smoothly. He assures her that the situation has been taken care of and now they should focus on the main goal. The plan is exactly what she thinks. She needs to seduce the son of the Della Vale family and marry him. He explains that she will have to transform every part of herself, her body, heart, speech, and everything from her fingertips to her toes, to look and act like a Bunapart. This way, she can deceive the high society of Fornotti. Adele has 3 months to train for this role. If she fails to be recognized as a lady by the end of that time, the plan will be called off. Adele wonders to herself if she'll also be in trouble if the plan fails, but tells Cesare she understands the task. Cesare then asks if she's curious about why the time limit is set for 3 months. Adele guesses it's because of his upcoming birthday party. Cesare confirms she's right and praises her for figuring out his plan just by reading the newspaper. He adds that it seems she knows more about his family than he does. Cesare gently holds Adele's chin and tilts her face up to look at him. He wonders if there might be another reason behind her interest and asks if she is actually interested in him. It's an interesting thought. Could Cesare end up falling for her? If not, what will happen next? It'll be interesting to find out. Cesare asks Adele if she's interested in him. He then comments that since she's just a countryside bumpkin, her face is the only thing she has. To her, he probably seems like a savior, and that might be why she wants to cling to him. He also makes it clear that he doesn't want her coming to his room in the middle of the night. Adele thanks him for the advice and tells him she's not really interested in him. Cesare is handsome, but Adele thinks he might also be a bit crazy. She agrees with the idea that he's cheerfully crazy. When Cesare hears that she's not interested, he laughs and says that her expression says otherwise. He adds that he's warning her because it has happened before. Adele says she'll keep that in mind and refers to him as master. Cesare tells her to call him elder brother from now on. Cesare tells Adele to call him brother from now on. He explains that from this point forward, she will go by the name Adelaide Bunapart. He says she is 5 years younger than him and used to live in a place called Capolo, which is far across the sea. She was thought to be just a commoner, but for some reason, she came to their land all by herself. Adele starts to think about whether Cesare is explaining how she became a Bunapart to fit the situation. She also wonders if the chairwoman, Eva Bunapart, is part of this plan. Cesare clarifies that Eva Bunapart, who is not only his grandmother, but also the chairwoman of Signoria, is not involved in their plan. He says it would have been impossible to start the plan without her permission. Eva seems more interested in seeing her great-grandchildren, and is busy preparing to welcome Lady Lucrezia with open arms. Adele hopes there won't be any issues between Eva and her as she gets used to her new role. Cesare asks Adele if she's not curious about other things, like his parents. He points out that if she's going to pretend to be his younger sister, she should know about them. He wonders why she hasn't asked about them yet. Adele thinks to herself that everyone knows about Cesare's parents. They were so in love that they left their family and their young child behind. It's a well-known rumor. Adele replies that she only heard that his parents moved away when he was 7 years old. Cesare smiles and says he doesn't need to explain more. They can just assume that his parents had her afterwards, because they were so in love. He wraps up the conversation by saying that's all for today. Adele wonders if they might be siblings, and if they were abandoned in the same way Cesare was. Who knows? Cesare tells Adele that there's a maid outside waiting for her. He says she should follow the maid and address her by her new name, Adele Bunapart. He hopes to see how ladylike she looks when they meet again, and is excited to see how much she will change. Adele responds that she will work hard on it. The maid introduces herself as Epony Kaur, and says she's honored to serve Adelaide. Epony shows her to the room where she will be staying. She explains that the Bunapart family usually avoids luxurious things, so the room isn't very extravagant. However, she assures Adelaide that she won't face any inconvenience during her stay. Adele notices that the room is very simple for a lady's room. Epony tells her that they can talk comfortably with each other. Adele thinks Epony is a really nice maid. Epony tells Adele that she will start attending etiquette classes the next day. She also says that Adele shouldn't catch a cold, so she needs to come with her now. Epony offers to help her bathe, but Adele declines, saying she can do it herself. Epony insists that a noble person shouldn't bathe alone, and that it's part of proper etiquette. Adele wonders if there's no privacy in nobility, and laughs. Epony says it's not a request and starts taking off her clothes. Adele agrees to let her help. When Epony sees Adele unclad, she gasps and exclaims, "Lady." Adele reassures her that the bruises on her body will heal soon. She's used to getting hit, and knows that the bruises won't leave any scars. Adele worries that Cesare might break the contract, because her body is in poor condition, and asks if Epony will report it. The contract between Adele and Cesare will remain valid until Cesare's marriage to Lady Lucrezia della Vale. Epony tells Adele that it will be all right as long as she doesn't get caught by Della Vale or Cesare until then. Adele feels relieved. Epony adds that Adele is too skinny, not just because of her wounds. She says Adele should focus on recovering her body for a while. Even though it might have been mentioned to her before, Epony reminds her that she is now part of the Bunapart family. Later, Cesare asks Epony how his younger sister is doing. Epony tells him that she doesn't look very healthy, and has marks from beatings on her body. Cesare comments that a pearl with scratches isn't very valuable. However, Epony assures him that if they treat her regularly, she will heal easily and become really beautiful once she puts on a little weight. Cesare remembers holding Adele's chin and looking at her the day before. He tells her that she's beautiful even now. He adds that he feels a bit sad that she is his younger sister. Adele, feeling suspicious, calls out, "Young master." Cesare reassures her that he's not going to do anything to her. He explains that he plans to end her life once their agreement is over. Adele thinks it's funny and wonders if he'll really do that. She wakes up again that night, as usual, because it's the time when the ships start coming back. The fishing boats that have been out all night drop their anchors at the port, and some fishermen bring in fish that didn't sell. She used to look forward to waking up each morning to wander around the port, but now she can hardly believe she's living such a luxurious life. She wonders if she'll be able to handle everything in the future. Unable to fall back asleep, she picks up a book. Her maid comes in and tells her it's time to get out of bed. She asks if Adele didn't rest well the night before. Adele explains that she just woke up a bit early and asks what she should do starting today. The maid says that from now on, she should expect to be busy all the time, and they will begin with breakfast. The maid tells her to sit down and asks if there's anything she'd like to eat. Adele says she's okay with anything, even if it's a bit old. The maid notes that Adele isn't picky and explains that being easygoing with food is a good quality for a lady. She adds that knowing dining etiquette is very important for a noble, and it's considered the foundation of being well-mannered. The maid starts showing her how to use the utensils, beginning with those placed on the side. She tells Adele to sit up straight, keep her chin up, and not to rest her elbows on the table. Adele should also avoid putting her hands down while eating. The maid praises her for following the rules as she eats. The meal includes beef carpaccio with arugula and celery, linguine with mackerel and abalone, and a potato-wrapped flounder with tomato sauce. Adele thinks the dishes are all excellent and delicious. But she wonders if she's eating too much, like a beggar. The maid tells Adele that it's great to see her eating well and suggests that she should try to have at least 4 meals a day. She explains that having a strong and healthy body is important, even for a woman. Adele likes the idea and thinks it sounds good. Next, the maid shows her around the mansion. She takes Adele to the study room, the conference room, the gallery room, and the billiards room, among other places. She points out that the master's office is in the center of the first floor, and reminds Adele to always knock on his door before entering. She explains that these are the rules of the mansion. Adele asks if there's anything else she should be careful about. The maid says she'll tell her about the people living in the mansion. Right now, there are 6 people who know about Adele and the master's plan. In a few days, there will be a 7th person, Madame Flavia. She will also teach Adele about being a lady. Madame Flavia is known to be strict and stern, but she's very skilled. So the maid advises Adele to listen to and follow her instructions carefully. Adele says she understands and will follow the advice. She then asks how she should greet Madame Flavia when she first meets her. The maid explains that Adele should learn the Fornotti way of greeting. She shows Adele how to do it. Hold her skirt to the side, straighten her back, slightly bend her knees, and lower her head. The maid says Adele does it perfectly and praises her for being a quick learner. Later, Adele is lying on her bed, ready to sleep. Epony says a prayer, hoping the sea goddess will watch over Adele during the night. Adele responds, wishing the same for Epony. Adele lies in bed, staring at the ceiling. She closes her eyes and thinks about how quiet it is here. She notices that she doesn't hear the usual noise from Kimora anymore. It's so peaceful, and she realizes she used to take having warm food and a quiet place to sleep for granted. Suddenly, a voice calls her name, telling her to run. Adele opens her eyes and sees Epony. She quickly gets up as Epony says there's a big problem. Madame Flavia has unexpectedly arrived at the mansion. Adele knows it's going to be tough with someone like Madame Flavia, who looks so intimidating. Epony rushes in, saying they need to hurry. She brings Adele some clothes to quickly change into. Adele, still half asleep, asks what's happening so early in the morning. Just then, Madame Flavia bursts through the door. Madame Flavia Laudin comes from a long line of servants who have worked for the Bunapart family for generations. She is well known in high society for her beauty and elegance. But she is also famous for being very strict and having unusual teaching methods when it comes to training young girls. Madame Flavia sees Adele and immediately screams at her, complaining about what she's wearing. Adele apologizes and explains that she was in a hurry. But Madame Flavia doesn't accept the apology. She yells at Adele, saying it's vulgar and disrespectful for her to answer like that. Adele lowers her head, trying to figure out what Madame Flavia wants her to do, and whether she should ask for guidance or not. At the entrance to the room, Cesare is standing there. He remarks that if Adele had proper manners, she wouldn't have summoned Madame Flavia in such an inappropriate way. He then tells Madame Flavia that he didn't expect her to show up so early in the morning. Madame Flavia calls out to Cesare, asking him to let her explain herself. Cesare greets her with a peck on the cheek, but Madame Flavia reminds him that they are in public. Cesare then asks if she slept well the night before. She says yes, and he is pleased to hear that. He tells her he would have liked her to join him for lunch, but he isn't sure if she will have time. She agrees, saying she welcomes any invitation from him. With a smile on her face, Madame Flavia looks at Cesare and places her hand on her forehead, saying he is really something. Cesare interrupts, saying he knows he's handsome. Madame Flavia thinks he's too charming, and Cesare asks if that's not why women like him. He then notices Adele staring at him and asks if she was about to wash up, adding that he should have come a little later. Madame Flavia tells Cesare not to speak so carelessly, because it might give Adele the wrong idea. Adele wishes she had known more about what Madame Flavia meant by that. Madame Flavia looks at Adele and says that she seems to not care about her appearance at all, and that this is damaging her pride. She asks Adele how she dares to act so carelessly when she's just a lowly person. Madame Flavia then steps closer to Adele, pulls her shirt down a little, and points to the dirty scars on her body. She demands to know what those scars are from. Adele tries to explain that the scars are nothing serious and will heal quickly. She assures Madame Flavia that they won't interfere with the plans and that everything will be fine. Madame Flavia then turns to Cesare and tells him that Adele is not good enough. She says she doesn't even know where Adele came from. Madame Flavia suggests that Adele must have gotten those scars from homeless drunks, while she was involved in some shameful activities. She continues by saying that there are people even among the lower classes who are lazy and have no courage. Madame Flavia believes that even if Adele spent 100 years trying, she wouldn't be able to fit into high society. According to her, Adele isn't even close to being a noble lady and isn't suitable for being part of Cesare's plan. Madame Flavia adds that it's obvious Adele is trying to use her body to climb up the social ladder. Her harsh words are like a fire that can burn down someone's courage and self-respect. Adele remembers the old man who had scolded her, asking if she was looking down on him just because he lost a few dollars. She recalls another customer who called her a dirty lowlife because she didn't clean his shoes properly, and someone else who complained about not receiving last week's allowance. Adele probably wonders what it would be like to go back to that kind of life in the slum. Adele apologizes, saying that while she may have many shortcomings, she is trying her best. Madame Flavia, with her arrogant tone, questions if Adele thinks she can hide her past just through hard work, and if she believes she can fool people who have always lived in high society. Madame Flavia thinks it's arrogant of Adele to believe she can change her status simply because she has lived in a lowly way her entire life. Adele says she wasn't born with parents and hasn't learned much, so she's not sure if it's possible to change her past. But she thinks her brother Cesare must believe it's possible, which is why he brought her here. Even though Madame Flavia is looking at her with disgust, Adele adds that if Madame thinks there's a problem with her trying, maybe it would be better to talk to her brother about it. Adele's boldness shows she's ready to face any obstacles ahead. Madame Flavia tells Adele to talk to Cesare if there's any problem, and asks for forgiveness if she seemed rude due to Adele's lack of education. She starts to call Adele a little something, but doesn't finish her sentence. Then she remembers she has an appointment and says she'll be leaving. As she walks out, Cesare watches her with a cool smile. His smile is way better than Madame's harsh look. He turns to Adele and tells her he was impressed with how she handled things, and she thanks him. Adele wonders if Cesare noticed her bruises. He tells her she doesn't seem to be handling the situation very well. He explains that Madame Flavia is probably just stressed out. Cesare adds that things would be easier for Adele if she follows the rules and mentions that she seems more sympathetic than she looks. Maybe that's just how he sees her as the young master. Adele asks Cesare if he's suggesting she should act pitiful and beg. He replies that she's already pitiful enough without needing to act that way. He says it's not a big change for her since she's lived like that her whole life, just a bit strange. Cesare wonders if she's smart enough to handle threats and make the right choices, calling her Adelaide. It seems like he's trying to provoke her, and she turns away, apologizing. In her mind, Adele thinks he might be testing her reaction. She promises herself to do her best to meet his expectations, because she doesn't want to be someone's source of entertainment. Cesare says that everyone becomes boring eventually as he walks away. The next morning, Adele asks Epony if Madame Flavia will come back to teach her again. Epony tells her not to worry. As she opens the door, Madame Flavia is already waiting for them in the hall. Epony reassures Adele that what's been planned will go ahead. Madame Flavia looks at Adele with a look of clear disgust. Madame Flavia addresses her as Adelaide Bunapart, and says that Bunapart isn't a name that just anyone can have. She adds that even having a great blue star on her chest would anger the sea goddess, making it clear that Adele doesn't deserve such a prestigious name. Madame Flavia continues, saying that Lord Cesare wants her to become a refined lady, but she still has a long way to go. She then tells Adele to get down on her knees. Adele looks at her in shock and disbelief. Madame Flavia repeats her command, making it clear that she expects Adele to obey. With no other option, Adele gets down on her knees, wondering why Madame Flavia is being so harsh. She thinks about whether it's because she isn't of noble blood, or because she used to work as a shoe polisher, or if Madame Flavia just wants to hurt her. Adele feels that if Madame Flavia is trying to hurt her, she's chosen the wrong way since her knees are already worn out from her past work polishing shoes. Madame Flavia tells Adele to listen carefully. She steps on Adele's thigh and says that Adele is just an asset. All she has to do is stay quiet and behave until she's sold to the Delaval family. Madame Flavia warns that if Adele tries to go beyond her limits, they won't hesitate to feed her to the sharks. She insists that Adele should know her place and asks if she understands. Adele confirms, and Madame Flavia tells her to get up so they can start the training. Madame Flavia begins with Adele's walking posture. Epony brings out a pair of shoes and explains that they are designed to correct her walking manners. Adele must wear these shoes all the time, even when Madame Flavia isn't around. As Adele puts on the shoes, she thinks about how they are her new shoes. She wants to mention how uncomfortable they are, but Madame Flavia interrupts her, telling her to stand up. Madame Flavia says that Adele has to walk continuously from one end of the room to the other, and she shouldn't stop until Madame Flavia says so. As Adele is about to start walking, she stumbles and falls. She takes off the shoes and says she can't do it anymore. Madame Flavia scolds her, questioning how she can have such an attitude during a lesson. Madame Flavia adds that Adele doesn't even have the will to learn and concludes that she doesn't deserve to be a Bunapart. She tells Adele to leave immediately. Madame Flavia tries to chase Adele out, calling her a filthy brat. But then she thinks about how Adele has been walking in those small heels for hours without complaining. Madame Flavia wonders if she should give Adele another chance to walk. She suspects that Adele is being stubborn and thinks too highly of herself. Madame Flavia orders Epony to leave for a while, but Epony apologizes, saying the young master instructed her not to leave Adele's side. Madame Flavia tells Adele that she will speak to Duke Cesare personally and swears on the name of Lord Anne that she isn't planning to punish her. After hearing this, the maid leaves. Madame Flavia then turns back to Adele, calling her a lowlife. She tells Adele straight out to leave the mansion. Adele replies that this isn't what the person who brought her here wants, but Madame Flavia insists that she's saying this now because, compared to the Bunapart family, the Delaval family isn't a great match for the marriage. However, they are still superior to her, since she is lazy and crude. Madame Flavia says Adele should know her place and step back. She adds that Lord Anne will ensure Adele is safe and they will give her some money as compensation. Madame Flavia then asks if Adele wants her brother to marry Lady Lucrezia. She says she thought Adele was there to follow her brother's wishes, but it seems she was wrong. Madame Flavia apologizes, saying she will tell her brother the truth. She also says that this is what the chairwoman wants, and that she is following the chairwoman's orders. The agreement between the Della Vale and Bunapart families is very old-fashioned and has lasted a long time. Madame Flavia explains that without such an agreement, someone like Duke Cesare wouldn't even consider marrying. He's admired by many women, yet is still not settling down and acts like a child. She says that these prestigious families must stay united and asks Adele if she understands now. Madame Flavia continues by saying that Adele is stuck in the middle of a big struggle right now. She notes that Adele hasn't been following her orders and calls her a greedy brat, questioning if Adele is behaving this way to get more money. Adele replies that it's not about money, she simply enjoys the food at the mansion. Madame Flavia is surprised and says, "What?" She didn't realize that Adele is just living for the moment. Madame Flavia goes on to say that the things she mentioned, money and the future, are luxuries for those who can barely make ends meet. Promising a bright future means nothing to people who are struggling, as they can't even get by in the present. Madame Flavia questions how Adele can act like she does, given that she's been starved before. She calls Adele a beast, saying that she's only lived a life of struggle until now. Adele has experienced extreme hunger, even going a whole month with just dry barley bread. Madame Flavia is frustrated, stating that Adele has lived an uncertain life where finding enough to eat each day was a constant worry. She adds that's why she has nothing more to say to Adele. Madame Flavia then apologizes, saying she's sorry, but even if she orders Adele to leave, she won't be able to leave the Bunapart family. She watches Adele and wonders why, despite her tough life, Adele still has an elegant appearance and fresh charm, even while wearing such uncomfortable shoes. Madame Flavia finds this confusing and is frustrated by the thought of the Duke and Adele together. She laughs, wondering if she should speed up finding other solutions, or if she might even be expected to produce a daughter for the Duke. She decides she needs to move on and find other ways to handle the situation. The week has flown by quickly, and Adele realizes she's already spent a full week enduring Madame Flavia's classes. She's learned a lot about speaking properly, proper manners, understanding social cues, how to talk to ladies of higher status, gracefully turning down a gentleman's invitation, and walking the right way. Eponine asks if Adele's feet are okay. Adele says they are fine, and adds that, as Madame Flavia also knows, her walking style is now perfect. Madame Flavia praises Adele's fast progress, saying it's really impressive. She notes that Adele soaks up all the information like a sponge, even though Madame Flavia has only told her things once. While ongoing training is still important, Eponine mentions that no one would think Adele is from a lower class now. Eponine then notices some ladies standing at a distance and asks about them. Adele explains that they are part of the Orcanina's delegation. Eponine explains that the ladies are here because, while Adele was busy with her training, the second prince of Orcanina recently became the emperor with the help of Lord Cesare. It was a big job, because the prince didn't have a strong position before, but he managed to succeed in the end. To thank Lord Cesare, the emperor sent a gift to the mansion, which is why it's been so noisy lately. Adele realizes that helping the prince will make her brother Cesare's influence and status even greater. Eponine agrees, saying that's correct. The ladies greet Cesare with "Your Grace," and he responds with a pleasant "Good morning" to them. They ask if he's been there all along, because they have been searching for him. Eponine tells Adele that it looks like Cesare is with the ladies now. Cesare is often seen as the favored one by fate and the goddess, someone blessed by the sea goddess, but he doesn't seem to care much about those blessings. Even though it might sound strange, he appears empty inside. Eponine suggests they should leave before anyone notices them. Adele agrees, saying, "Sure. One of the ladies asks Cesar what he is looking at as he stares at the trees. He says he thought he saw a mermaid. When she looks over to check, he blocks her view with his fingers, joking that there's already one right there. The lady tells him he's being playful. Cesar then asks if she doesn't like it and if she'll visit him again that night. She replies that if he promises to be serious, she'll come see him tonight. Cesar thinks to himself that she's just talking nonsense and wonders why people try to give so much meaning to a one-night stand. Cesar thinks to himself that the blonde lady seemed quite appealing before, but not anymore. He tells her it's cute, but thinks she's being presumptuous, feeling a bit bad about it. She says she'll be leaving, and he tells her to have a safe trip back. He thinks it's boring and walks away. Cesar tries to remember the path Adele took earlier. From a distance, he sees her telling a man to let her go, but the man doesn't listen and keeps holding her hand tightly. A few minutes earlier, Adele accidentally hits her foot against a rock and falls down. Epony screams, "Young lady." Adele apologizes and says she needs to check her feet right away. Epony sees that Adele's feet are injured and says it's serious, insisting that Adele shouldn't work anymore. Adele asks if there's any anesthetic, thinking she can handle a bit more pain. Epony tells her they will end the day's class here. She says she will get a wheelchair for Adele, so she should rest her feet for now, and she'll be back quickly. Adele puts her feet in the water fountain, and the cold water helps ease the pain. It's a bit tough, but it's nothing compared to the hard days she had in Kimora. Adele sees 3 men walking by, talking among themselves. One of them says he can't believe it's a mermaid's heart, and that Bunapart is impressive for revealing it. Another man says Cesare must have just wanted to throw a party. Adele realizes they must be nobles and they are heading towards her, so she decides to hide. As they keep talking, one man mentions he can't see Lady Lucrezia anywhere, and thought she would be with Duke Cesar. Another man says that Duke della Vale has been confined to her quarters and wonders if it will be over soon. Adele hides by the side of the waterfall, wondering if they have left. One of the men spots her, grabs his friends, and points towards her, saying there is a woman hiding in the water fountain. As she tries to move, Adele falls into the water. One of the men, named Henry, is told by his friend that he is crossing the line, but Henry just says he didn't push her, she fell on her own. Henry wonders aloud if he has caught a mermaid instead of finding a person. He questions who she is, noting that she doesn't look like a lady or noble since she has no shoes, but her dress is too nice to be from a maid. Adele stays silent, and Henry asks if she won't talk. He warns her that she'll be punished if she doesn't. Henry also wonders if she's acting this way just to be punished. One of the men tells Henry to stop and points out that they are in Bunapart's territory. Henry responds that it doesn't matter and questions whether he has to be extra careful even when punishing a maid. Another man tells Henry he's going too far and tells him to lower his voice. Henry continues, asking if Bunapart sees himself as a king now. Adele says it could be possible if they keep pushing her, comparing it to tearing her arms and torso apart. One man confirms that she speaks like a noble, but Adele insists again that they should let her go, or they'll regret it. As it becomes clear that she's not joking, the men wonder who she really is. They guess that she might be an etiquette teacher, but her rough hands make them think she could be a prostitute who sneaked in. They consider that it makes sense, especially since they have many customers around. Adele tells Henry again to let her go, but Henry calls her a bitch, and says she won't be treated like a human by Cesar. He doesn't understand why she even came to the mansion, suggesting that she should just get close to him since she's there. Just then, Cesar arrives. The men turn around and call him Duke Cesar. Cesar looks at them and says it seems like they are dealing with the bastard Cesar instead of the Duke. He asks Henry Petch if he agrees. As Cesar walks closer, he comments that Duke Petch will be pleased to hear about this. He mentions that Pech is coming to Bunapart's mansion with his old age just to borrow some money, and that Madame Pech is with him to make him look more pitiful. Hearing this, the two men with Henry try to hold him back, because he starts calling Cesare a bastard and getting agitated. They tell him to calm down. One of the men tells Cesare to calm down, because his words are going too far. Cesare puts his hand on Henry's shoulder, and says they're the ones who crossed the line by treating his younger sister like a prostitute. He adds that with Henry's behavior, it's hard to believe he's even a noble. He wonders if the woman is really Cesare's younger sister, and asks what he means by younger sister. Cesare walks over to her, gives her his jacket, and asks what's happening. She asks how he found her, but Henry interrupts, saying he shouldn't lie because everyone knows Cesare doesn't have a sister. Cesare explains that she was brought in and that his parents are fine, and he questions if he needs to explain further. Henry responds that it's still not entirely their fault and asks which noble lady looks like this, with bare feet covered in scars. Adele apologizes, saying she hurt her feet badly while practicing, because she didn't want to bring shame to the Bunapart name. She explains that she had trouble walking and sent for Epony, but she didn't expect something like this to happen at the Bunapart mansion. Carrying her, Cesare reminds her not to push herself too hard and questions the value of a reputation gained this way. He warns that if he becomes a laughingstock in social circles, it will ruin Bunapart's reputation. He adds that her health is more important and that they are family, so it's not something to worry about. He gives her a gentle kiss on the forehead. Adele wonders about the word, family, since she has never heard it before, even as a joke. She questions if nobles treat their family like this and how she should react to such warm treatment. Then she kisses him on the cheek, and thanks him for calling him brother. He says it's nothing. One of the men confirms that Cesare is indeed Adele's older brother, and the other man agrees, noting that they do look alike. Cesare then turns to them and asks if they still want to continue messing with his sister. The men quickly respond, saying it was all just a joke. They explain that they were trying to stop Henry from causing more trouble, and had no idea Adele was his sister. Cesare finds their excuses amusing and raises an eyebrow, asking them what they would have done if Adele wasn't actually his sister. The men try to backpedal, saying it was simply a mistake. One of them then tells Cesare not to worry too much about it and asks him to forgive them for their actions. Cesare, still frustrated, says that he plans on making Henry's life difficult as well, even though he doesn't know which family Henry belongs to. He adds that it was a mistake on their part, and hopes they will be able to move past it. His tone suggests that while he's willing to let it go, he expects them to understand the seriousness of their actions. The men seem to sense his irritation and nod in agreement, hoping that Cesare will accept their apology and move on. Away from the others, Cesare asks Adele if she is uncomfortable and tells her to hang in there because they are almost at the mansion. He notices that a blonde woman and another lady see them and worries they might misunderstand the situation. As they enter the mansion, Cesare asks himself if he really should be doing this. Adele, trying to get up, apologizes and stumbles, falling down again. It's clear that she's having a tough time managing everything at once. Cesare notices her struggle and asks about Epony. Adele explains that Epony went to get a wheelchair, because she's unable to walk properly right now. Cesare shakes his head in frustration. He tells her that this isn't what he had in mind when he agreed to help. He adds that he didn't spend his money just to have someone who can't even stand on their own. He starts to realize that he might be being a bit too harsh, but he can't help feeling that the situation is frustrating and disappointing. Adele apologizes again, saying she didn't expect to run into him like this. Cesare, feeling a mix of irritation and confusion, puts his foot on hers. He questions if she has some kind of fetish for getting hit or hurt by people. He wonders if this habit of being mistreated is something she picked up from the streets, and if she just needs someone to be strong and act as a man for her. He's perplexed by why anyone would engage in such actions in Bunapart's territory, especially when they don't even seem to understand what they're doing. His frustration grows as he tries to make sense of the situation.
Lying on the floor, Adelaide stares up, her voice trembling as she asks if she is being blamed for tempting them. Cesare looks down at her with an expression that barely changes and tells her she already knows the truth. She turns her head slightly, her breath uneven, and denies it. She repeats herself, but the words sound weaker each time. He laughs, the sound sending a chill through her. Her eyes widened in shock. Without warning, he brings up Madame Flavia, stating that she has been acting mischievously. His boot presses down on the wounds on her legs, making her let out a painful moan. He leans in, his hands casually resting in his pockets, and questions her abilities. Whether it is fighting, gaining favor, or even handling the situation properly, he points out that there are different ways to deal with it. However, she has failed in every possible way. She remains silent, the pain overwhelming her. He reminds her that she is good at putting aside her pride and begging, but in the end, why should he waste his money on someone so useless? The weight of his words sinks deep. Lying there motionless, she finally mutters to herself, blaming only herself for everything. The realization grows heavier, and she says it again, louder this time. He simply turns his back to her and, without looking, states that he is glad she understands. With that, he tells her to treat her wounds before they rot. At that moment, the door bursts open, and a young servant rushes in, her voice urgent as she calls out to Cesare. She hurries toward him, trying to deliver an important message about the lady. However, he immediately cuts her off, dismissing the conversation unless it is truly important. Without sparing them another glance, he walks out, announcing that classes will be closed for 3 days. With that, he shuts the door behind him, leaving the two women alone. Meanwhile, in another room, Cesare sits at his desk, a cigarette between his fingers and a stack of papers in front of him. His mind drifts as he stares at an image. Thoughts swirl in his head as he recalls the words spoken about the second son, someone unable to continue the family's bloodline, a man incapable of standing on his own. He smirks, finally understanding what was being discussed in Bunapart's garden. As he stands from his chair, he knows it is time to clean himself up. The plan has completely fallen apart. Adelaide's exposure has ruined everything, making it nearly impossible to arrange another marriage partner. No matter what happens now, one thing is certain. His image as a Bonaparte must remain intact. His thoughts shift again, this time to a particular woman. Her green hair shimmers like aquatic plants, her skin is as pale as salt, and she has a figure that naturally draws attention. He can already imagine the kind of thoughts running through the minds of those who witnessed the earlier events. Even now, they must still be excited by the memory. A realization creeps into his mind as he recalls what happened. Did he, too, feel excited at that moment? The thought lingers, and a faint smile crosses his lips. If that is truly what he felt, then everything will fall apart once Ezra della Valle lays eyes on her. Before he can dwell on it any further, a knock sounds at the door. Without looking up, he gives a simple command. "Come in." Madame Flavia walks in, offering a polite greeting. Cesare before her responds with a smile. She approaches, and he addresses her, making it clear that while he does not mind helping the less fortunate, he does not wish to spend too much on it. She quickly apologizes, but he firmly tells her never to bother him again. Shocked by his words, she stares at him, and he reminds her that she is a wise woman, so she should understand what he means. Without another word, she turns and leaves, her face filled with frustration. As she walks away, she reflects on a certain shoe polisher, suspecting that the woman deliberately overworked her feet to gain sympathy. All the effort she put in to be acknowledged by Bonaparte now feels wasted. She cannot believe the trick that has been played and finds herself seething at the thought. Meanwhile, in the garden, a group of ladies engages in an intriguing conversation. One of them brings up a surprising topic, questioning if Lord Cesare has a lover. Another responds with curiosity, mentioning that she heard the woman in question was barefoot. The lady with brown hair dismisses the idea, insisting that Lord Cesare would never be interested in a woman without class. However, The discussion continues, with one suggesting that perhaps his taste has changed. The brown-haired lady acknowledges this as a possibility, but expresses doubts about the nature of the relationship. She shares a rumor that when he brought the woman in, she seemed unusually friendly. This revelation sparks further curiosity, and another lady in yellow exclaims in disbelief, pointing out that he never allows women into his home. As the conversation unfolds, the lady in yellow suddenly stands up, her frustration evident. She demands to know who this mysterious woman is. Overcome with emotion, she declares that she is feeling unwell and will be heading home. The lady in green offers a polite farewell, wishing her well. However, as soon as Genevieve storms off, the remaining ladies exchange knowing glances. They whisper among themselves, questioning why she is suddenly unwell. One of them hints at the obvious, suggesting that they all know the real reason behind her reaction. Genevieve rushes away, her mind racing with thoughts of the growing problem before her. She knows she must inform Lady Lucrezia immediately. Without wasting time, she sits down to write a letter. In her message, she describes the beauty of autumn in Fornati and acknowledges that Lady Lucrezia's period of self-reflection is almost complete. However, she cannot ignore the troubling news she has just learned. She reveals that according to the gossip among the women who visited Bunapart to admire the mermaid's heart, he was seen entering his home with an unknown woman in his arms. She wonders how much more heartbreak Lady Lucrezia will endure before he is satisfied. Furthermore, she questions the kind of woman who would dare try to win his favor. Finishing the letter, she seals it with care and hands it over, instructing that it be delivered to the Delaval family without delay. She signs off warmly, assuring Lady Lucrezia of her support. At the Delaval estate, the letter arrives, and its recipient reads through it with growing frustration. Thoughts race through her mind as she processes the shocking claims. She struggles to believe what she is reading. The very idea that Lord Cesare might be involved in such a situation is infuriating. She wonders what game he is playing this time, and questions how far he is willing to push her limits. Previously, rumors are spreading like wildfire. Everywhere people gather, they whisper about Duke Cesare and the mysterious woman hidden inside his mansion. Some recall the moment 3 days ago when the mermaid heart was revealed. That was also the day Henry Petch faced his downfall after making the mistake of crossing Cesare's woman. Witnesses remember how carefully the Duke carried her, fueling even more speculation. While some are curious, others are determined to uncover the truth. One man, reading a newspaper, confirms that the rumors must be true because Bonaparte has taken back the money he lent to the Petch family. Another wonders who this woman could be, and just when the discussion gets more intense, someone boldly states that she is the one who has captured Bonaparte's heart. Meanwhile, inside the water nursing area, Madame Flavia moves quickly down the hallway, her footsteps heavy with frustration. Each step echoes her thoughts. This situation cannot continue any longer. The Bonaparte family's name is at stake, and she refuses to let it be tarnished. The only solution is to get rid of the woman causing all this chaos. Without hesitation, she pushes open the door and calls out a name. Inside the room, Adelaide turns to face her. With a calm expression, she greets the older woman politely, showing no sign of fear. However, what shocks Flavia the most is not her words, but her appearance. It has only been 3 days, yet she looks noticeably different. Her once hollow cheeks now have a healthy glow, and the scars that once covered her body are almost gone. For a moment, Flavia can only stare. She had expected someone weak and pitiful, yet before her stands a woman who resembles the enchanting figures from old legends. As if sensing the older woman's thoughts, Adelaide calls her name again. Flavia quickly shakes off her surprise and raises her voice, confronting her without hesitation. She has already heard about the shameful display, how Adelaide dared to walk around with bare feet and a wet body in front of the nobles. If only she had stayed inside the mansion, such disgraceful things wouldn't have happened. Instead, she foolishly walked around carelessly, leading to this mess. Without waiting for an excuse, Flavia demands to know why she had been so reckless. In response, Adelaide immediately lowers her head and apologizes. However, the older woman is not satisfied. The words sound empty, and she refuses to accept meaningless apologies. Just then, Epone steps forward, cutting into the tense atmosphere. She politely interrupts, asking if she may say something. Flavia, though still irritated, gives her permission. Without hesitation, Epone expresses her thoughts. She admits she may not know as much about etiquette as the older woman, but from what she has observed, Adelaide's manner of walking was not lacking in any way. In fact, it was graceful, following the principles of bella figura. Moreover, if there was any progress, it was thanks to Flavia's incredible tutoring. Perhaps, instead of focusing on past mistakes, it would be better to move on to the next step in her training. For the second time that day, Flavia is caught off guard. She hadn't expected the maid to speak up so boldly, and yet, here she is, standing her ground. Although the older woman doesn't want to admit it, she recognizes that Epone has a way with words. In such a short time, she has managed to shift the mood, making it difficult to argue back. However, no matter what, she cannot forget that Cesare is watching all of this closely. With no other choice, she agrees. Yet, even as she gives in, her mind is already planning her next move. The lessons will continue, but that does not mean her goal has changed. She will find an opportunity to get rid of this woman once and for all. And with that thought, she wastes no time in announcing that the next class will begin. Madame Flavia walks along the grand hallway of the castle, her thoughts filled with irritation. Once again, the girl has been so diligent that it almost feels like an insult. She memorizes everything quickly and notices even the smallest details without hesitation. Unlike the other noblewomen, who used to throw tantrums and argue over the smallest mistakes, this one never gives a single excuse. If only she had shown even a little laziness, there would have been an opportunity to use it against her. But unfortunately, there is none. Suddenly, a voice calls from behind, breaking the silence. Turning swiftly, Madame Flavia is momentarily taken aback before recognizing the speaker. It is Lady Lucrezia. With grace and elegance, the noblewoman greets her, mentioning how it has been a long time since they last met. For a brief moment, Madame Flavia studies her. As expected, she truly deserves the title of the most beautiful woman in society. She is admired by many, and her presence alone commands attention. Lady Lucrezia comments on how well Madame Flavia appears, and in response she questions the reason for her visit to the Bunapart mansion. The noblewoman explains that she heard many from high society would be present, so she decided to come as well. The sight of everyone bustling about suggests that a grand banquet is being prepared for Orcanina. Acknowledging this, Madame Flavia remarks on how Duke Cesare has always had strong ties with Orcanina. However, this time, they even went as far as supporting the new emperor's rise to the throne. Curious, Lady Lucrezia places a hand on her chin and asks about Duke Cesare, mentioning that she has not seen him for some time due to the self-restraint order. She wonders if anything significant has happened in his absence. Instantly, Madame Flavia realizes that she must have heard the rumors. It is clear that she is troubled by them, most likely because of her long-standing affection for Cesare. Since the truth will eventually come to light, perhaps it is better to tell her now. Removing her hat, Madame Flavia begins to speak, acknowledging that Lady Lucrezia must have heard something. However, before she can continue, she hesitates. Aware of the weight of her words, she stops herself. Seeing this, Lady Lucrezia asks if she has touched on a sensitive topic. At that moment, Madame Flavia considers her position. If she truly thinks about it, she does not have to be the one to deal with that girl. There was already a time when Cesare had warned her. If he were to find out that she interfered again, the consequences would be unpredictable. However, if Lady Lucrezia were the one to act, it would be a different matter. She appears flawless and elegant, but if she were truly naive, she would not have come so close to being Cesare's fiancée. With a knowing smile, Madame Flavia makes up her mind. She advises Lady Lucrezia to listen carefully before revealing the shocking truth. The woman from the rumors is of direct Bonaparte blood. The reaction is immediate. Lady Lucrezia's eyes widened in disbelief. Her voice shakes slightly as she expresses her shock. She realizes that she has completely misunderstood everything. Feeling embarrassed, she wonders what she should do next. However, Madame Flavia corrects her, explaining that this is not a misunderstanding. Lady Adelaide is indeed a member of the Bonaparte family and Duke Cesare's younger sister. However, despite her noble blood, it is very possible that she was once just a starving girl living on the streets. After all, neither Mr. Rowan nor Miss Katerina has ever personally confirmed anything. As she speaks, she carefully adjusts her hat, expecting Lady Lucrezia to grasp the true meaning behind her words. A moment of silence follows before a knowing smile spreads across Lady Lucrezia's face. With a soft voice, she expresses her gratitude, stating that, as always, Madame Flavia has helped her realize many things. We see Apone serving Adelaide a meal, and an interesting conversation unfolded between them. As she poured tea into a cup, she casually suggested a stroll, which made Adelaide hesitate. After all, was it really all right to take a walk after what had happened? But Apone, always composed, reassured her, explaining that even the master wouldn't forbid such a thing, since strolling was part of a noble's daily routine. While pouring the tea, Apone mentioned that since the guests were planning to visit the lion's garden, it would be a good idea for them to head to the water garden instead. This made our female lead realize something. Ever since that day, Apone had started keeping track of all the guests' schedules. It was a small but noticeable change in her behavior. Without missing a beat, Apone turned to Adelaide and spoke about the water garden, describing the huge water organ there and how beautiful the place was. Our female lead couldn't help but notice that her companion had become a little friendlier than usual. However, she knew it wasn't out of genuine care, but rather out of pity. After picking up the cup, she took a sip of the tea before offering a quiet thanks. Now at the water garden, our female lead walked ahead while Apone followed closely behind. The atmosphere was just as described, calm and beautiful. The moist air wrapped around them, making her feel at ease. Just as she was admiring the surroundings, a voice from behind interrupted her thoughts. Looking back, she was met with a familiar face, Lady Lucrezia. The unexpected encounter left both Adelaide and Apone stunned. The noblewoman greeted them with a composed expression, and as if to confirm her identity, Apone whispered her full name under her breath. As Adelaide adjusted her gown, a thought crossed her mind. She never imagined meeting this person so soon. It was already a daunting situation. Still, maintaining her composure, she lifted her gown slightly and responded in the expected manner. This seemed to catch Lady Lucrezia off guard, though she quickly masked her reaction with a polite smile. A brief exchange followed, where the noblewoman expressed curiosity, noting that she had never seen Adelaide at the salon or the ball. The response was simple. She had yet to make her debut in society. With a graceful smile, Lady Lucrezia introduced herself fully and then asked the inevitable question, whose daughter was she? Adelaide knew this was coming. Without hesitation, she gave her answer, causing the noblewoman to react with visible shock. The words Bonaparte seemed almost foreign to her, and she even questioned if it was some sort of new joke or trend. Apologizing lightly, Lady Lucrezia mentioned that she had just finished a period of self-reflection. But Adelaide clarified that there was no misunderstanding. She truly was part of the Bonaparte family. Due to certain circumstances, however, she had been raised separately from her brother, Lord Cesare. Upon hearing this, Lady Lucrezia immediately picked up on the connection and asked if that meant she was staying inside the Bonaparte mansion with Lord Cesare. Adelaide officially becomes a Bonaparte, and Lady Lucrezia takes an immediate interest in her. However, something about their conversation feels off, and even Apone senses that something isn't right. Meanwhile, Lady Lucrezia rides away in her carriage, shedding tears as she shares her frustrations with her maid Hazel. She believes that Lord Cesare has been drawn to Adelaide and fears losing him completely. Hazel, however, urges her not to give up, insisting that they must act before it is too late. Now we see Adelaide standing with Apone, still processing Lady Lucrezia's words. When asked about her plans, she had simply said that she wanted to stay near her family. Yet something about the way Lady Lucrezia reacted to that response was strange. Reading the expressions of someone like her is difficult, and Adelaide isn't sure if it's because she's a noblewoman or if it's just her own nerves playing tricks on her. Nevertheless, Lady Lucrezia doesn't stay long. She politely ends the conversation, but before leaving, she says something that catches Adelaide completely off guard. She wishes her protection from harm, and in that moment, Adelaide realizes something. Lady Lucrezia knows something. As soon as she walks away, Epony doesn't hesitate to speak her mind. Something about their conversation does not sit well with her, and she decides that she must report this to the master. Adelaide, on the other hand, doesn't believe Lady Lucrezia would openly challenge the master's will, but she understands that the real danger isn't always what is seen on the surface. The waves beneath the water are always more dangerous than the ones crashing in front of you. Meanwhile, Lady Lucrezia sits inside her carriage with Hazel. Despite the calm exterior she had shown earlier, she is now in tears. However, instead of despair, there's something else in her voice: determination. She believes the conversation went well, but Hazel is quick to notice that something is wrong. When she asks what happened, Lady Lucrezia doesn't hold back. She believes that Lord Cesare has fallen for Adelaide once again. Hazel is confused. Wasn't Adelaide supposed to be his younger sister? But Lady Lucrezia knows better. Those were not the hands of a noble woman, and Cesare despises her so much that he would rather acknowledge someone who isn't even of noble birth as his sister than accept her. Tears continue to fall as Lady Lucrezia speaks her mind. She fears that if Adelaide fails to capture Cesare's heart, she might set her sights on someone else, her own brother. And if that happens, there will be no stopping her. Hazel doesn't hesitate to respond. She tells her lady that crying will solve nothing. If she gives up now, Adelaide will surely become part of the Della Valle family. That cannot be allowed to happen. They must drive her away before it's too late. Lady Lucrezia, however, feels helpless. She doesn't know what to do, and more than anything, she is afraid. But Hazel knows her lady well. She has always been sweet and fragile, but that doesn't mean she has to fight alone. Reassuring her, Hazel promises to stand by her side no matter what happens. Encouraged by these words, Lady Lucrezia finally finds the resolve she needs. Holding Hazel's hand, she asks if she is truly certain, and without hesitation, Hazel confirms it. That is all Lady Lucrezia needs to hear. She embraces her maid, grateful for her unwavering support. However, as the tears dry, a different expression forms on her face. A wicked smile appears as she promises never to forget the loyalty Hazel has shown her. The Bunapart castle is buzzing with activity as people move around, busy with banquet preparations. Some are carrying flowers, carefully placing them in different rooms, while others adjust decorations. The sound of constant chatter fills the air as someone checks on a tapestry, making sure it is fully decorated. Meanwhile, Adelaide stands on the staircase observing everything. It is clear to her that the noise comes from all the preparations. Without wasting time, she heads to Cesare's office. As she reaches the door, she pauses for a moment, remembering something important. She has been told not to knock. Instead, she simply pushes the door open and steps inside. The man standing beside Cesare immediately turns to inform him that a guest has arrived. He looks up, and upon seeing his younger sister, he calls her name before returning his attention to the paper in front of him. While writing, he asks about her feet. Lowering her head slightly, she responds, saying that she is almost healed, thanks to his care. However, his reaction is unexpected. Instead of acknowledging her words, he questions whether he actually cared for her. Without hesitation, she clarifies that she was only being polite. He takes a moment to look at her before finally asking why she is there. She then looks up and asks if she can participate in the event that will be held that day. This question catches both him and his assistant off guard. After a brief silence, he tells her that it will be difficult. Then he directly asks if this is the reason she came. Without hesitation, she states that she actually wants to go to the event in the capital. A small smile forms on his face as he comments on how he never knew his younger sister had such a cute side. He adds that it seems she is getting used to things now. His assistant, who has been watching the exchange, calls out to him and closely observes his reaction. Finally, our male lead sighs and agrees, telling her that since she is already there, introductions are in order. He introduces our female lead to the man beside him, and in response, she places a hand on her chest and offers a polite greeting. He then turns to his assistant and introduces him as Gigi Manfredi. Without hesitation, Gigi greets her, explaining that he works as Cesare's assistant and is also involved with the Stalin Merchant, which is operated by the Bunapart family. Cesare, looking relaxed now, mentions that he will speak casually about his younger sister from now on and asks for understanding. Gigi immediately reassures him that it is not a problem. After a moment, Gigi speaks again, saying that he has been thinking about something since earlier. Then he comments on how beautiful Adelaide is, comparing her to a mermaid from the sea. Cesare, as if agreeing, notes that she has long limbs. However, Gigi insists that he is telling the truth, making it clear that his words are not just flattery. Gigi reminds him that he should have examined a certain document more carefully. Meanwhile, she finds herself lost in thought. Ever since meeting Cesare, it feels as if parts of her mind are slowly being chipped away piece by piece, as if by a delicate knife. She remembers the painful sting of heels stepping on her feet and words that cut through her heart. That day, she tried to erase everything from her memory. Cesare, focused on his writing, suddenly brings up Lucrezia. He already knows about the warning she received and seems amused by it. She hesitates, but eventually admits that if that was meant to be a warning, then so be it. Her hand trembles slightly as she speaks. He continues writing, making it clear that it should indeed be considered one. He reflects on how Epony, someone more suited for high society, is being dragged into unfamiliar situations. It intrigues him. He wonders how certain people seem to know things they shouldn't. Nonetheless, he assures Adelaide that a braccier will accompany her after the banquet ends. He instructs her to leave. Without another word, she exits, closing the door behind her. Now alone with Cesare, Gigi expresses concern. If the braccier will only arrive after 2 days, that means Adelaide will be unprotected at Lucrezia's banquet. He wonders if she will be safe in the meantime. Cesare, unfazed, turns his attention away from his papers and remarks that nothing should happen inside the Bunapart mansion. Rather than worrying about that, he orders Gigi to prepare a galley, something old. Gigi nods and immediately agrees. Cesare leans back, deep in thought. Once again, something doesn't sit right, and he must take action. Meanwhile, the banquet is in full swing, and whispers fill the grand hall. Among the guests, discussions arise about Flavia Loredan's presence. Some wonder if she is regaining favor with Duke Cesare after previously being pushed aside. If she is returning to the center of high society, perhaps building a connection with her in advance would be wise. Flavia, overhearing these conversations, remains composed. Her family may have fallen behind for a time, but with Bonaparte on their side, she is confident everything will be fine. From across the room, Lucrezia greets Flavia with polite words, wishing her well. Flavia, turning to face her, responds in the same manner. The atmosphere remains elegant, with Lucrezia commenting on the beauty of the banquet. She praises Cesare's refined taste, and then, as if it were just a casual remark, she brings up the matter of someone who does not belong in the Bonaparte family. Flavia, not interested in the topic, states that if it is about that, she has nothing more to say. Lucrezia can handle it however she pleases. However, Lucrezia is not so easily dismissed. With a smile, she wonders if it would be better to discuss the matter directly with Cesare. If she does, she might mention how Flavia was the one who revealed Adelaide's birth secret. Flavia's expression hardens. She insists that she only shared that information as a favor. Lucrezia, still holding her wine with a relaxed posture, claims she is simply being smart. If Cesare truly trusts Flavia, then why did she reveal one of his secrets? However, she insists that there is no hostility between them. They share a common enemy, after all. Moving closer, Lucrezia assures Flavia that their agreement will be handled with the utmost discretion. The smile on her lips does not match the underlying tension in her words. Flavia dislikes the direction this conversation is heading, but she has no choice. Eventually, she speaks up, demanding to know exactly what Lucrezia wants. In the quiet of her room, Epony carefully arranges her hair, completely unbothered by the grand ball taking place. Meanwhile, our female lead sits nearby, sensing the distant excitement. She remarks that the event must have begun, and Epony, without looking up, casually agrees. Adelaide then asks if she plans to attend, but Epony simply states that since she is not a newcomer, she has no obligation to be there. She then turns the question back, wondering about Adelaide's decision. Our female lead hesitates, unsure, and Epony takes a moment to observe her. She points out that with her beauty, she would certainly attract everyone's attention the moment she walked in. She responds with a simple question, as if testing the truth of those words, but her thoughts drift elsewhere. She reminds herself that revealing any weakness would only give power to those waiting to use it against her. Epony, still focused on the conversation, suddenly brings up something unexpected. She mentions that a dress once worn by the Lady of Bunapart should never be worn again. Everything, from hats and parasols to gloves and shoes, must always be brand new. Without waiting for a response, she assumes Adelaide must have visited Bella Stella Street daily. However, that assumption couldn't be further from the truth. Adelaide reflects on her past, recalling how, even when she lived in Kimora, she had never set foot there. There was no rule against entering, yet the street, so bright and elegant, always felt out of reach. The stores had names that sounded like verses from a love poem, making it feel more like a dream than a place she belonged. As Epony continues brushing Adelaide's hair, she glances at the mirror, taking in the sight. She quietly asks if it looks beautiful, and Epony, without hesitation, confirms that it does. However, the moment of peace is short-lived. A sudden knock on the door disrupts the stillness, and Epony immediately turns her head. There are no expected visitors, which makes this interruption unusual. Cautiously, she approaches the door and opens it just slightly, enough to see who stands outside. To her surprise, it is Madame Flavia. Madame Flavia greets her warmly, wishing her good days, and Epony, still processing the unexpected visit, acknowledges her presence. However, there is no time for pleasantries. Madame Flavia quickly states the reason for her visit. She needs to discuss an urgent matter regarding Lord Cesare, as another report is required. The request is serious, but Epony is currently attending our female lead, so she asks Madame Flavia to wait for a moment. Turning back inside, she informs Adelaide that she will have to step away for a while. Adelaide, unbothered, simply nods and agrees. Without hesitation, Epony followed, stepping out and closing the door behind her. However, just as she was about to shut it completely, Madame Flavia glanced back inside with a look that sent chills down the spine. It was a wicked stare, the kind that made it clear something wasn't quite right. Meanwhile, our female lead was seated comfortably, a book in hand. She tried to focus on the words, but the distant sound of music from the ball filled the air, making it difficult to concentrate. Her mind wandered to Bella Stella streets, the excitement building up so much that reading felt impossible. Then, out of nowhere, a knock echoed through the room. Confused, she paused. Epony had just left. Surely she wouldn't be back so soon. Before she could react further, something strange happened. A voice whispered inside her head, warning her not to open the door. She spun around quickly, expecting to find someone nearby, but she was alone. The room was empty, yet the warning still lingered. Was her mind playing tricks on her? Was it just her imagination? Before she could think too much about it, the door swung open, revealing a maid. The girl wasted no time, apologizing for entering without permission. But she insisted it was urgent. Adelaide's gaze settled on her. She was young, too young to be working as a maid in Bunapart. Something about her didn't quite fit, from the way she looked to the way her uniform seemed slightly off. Still, the message was clear. Lord Cesare was calling for her, her brother. She sat still for a moment, observing the maid. Something about this situation felt off. However, if he was calling, there was no room for hesitation. Rising from the chair, she grabbed her coat and nodded, agreeing to follow. As they walked, she asked where they were heading. The maid replied without stopping. Lord Cesare was waiting on the balcony. Step after step, an uneasy feeling grew inside her. Something about this felt wrong, yet there was no turning back. He wasn't the type to explain himself, and she knew better than to question his decisions. Finally, they reached the top. The maid opened the door, and in that instant, everything changed. A strong gust of wind sent Adelaide's coat flying into the air. She barely had time to process what was happening when she realized the truth. There was no balcony. It was a dead end. And then, without warning, the maid pushed her. Adelaide's heart pounded as she fell, the last thing she heard being a quiet apology. At the grand ball, the atmosphere is filled with excitement as guests gather around Duke Cesare, showering him with praise. Everyone is impressed, not only because he is the youngest member of the priority, but also because he played a key role in the coronation of the emperor from the neighboring country. Since the emperor happens to be his cousin, this strengthens diplomatic ties and increases his influence within the council. As the crowd admires him, they talk about his many qualities. With a striking appearance, an excellent family background, strong business skills, and a sharp political mind, he seems to lack nothing. Naturally, the question arises, who could possibly be worthy of such a man? There are whispers about his rumored engagement to Lady Lucrezia della Valle, but many doubt that it will actually happen. However, just as the conversation grows more interesting, he excuses himself and walks away. Stepping onto the balcony, he takes a seat, finally finding a moment of peace. The noise from the ballroom fades, leaving only the quiet night. As he lights a cigarette, he looks up and notices an inscription on the ceiling. It seems unusual. Why would there be something engraved there? Leaning back, he lets out a soft laugh as he reads the letters, K-E-R. These initials remind him of Catherine Bonaparte and Rowan Bonaparte. On nights like this, when the ballroom was alive with music and laughter, those two would dance together, lost in their own world. Meanwhile, he would sit in the most splendid chair, handed a cookie, watching them for hours. As he takes another drag from his cigarette, memories flood back. It always feels strange to return to this place. The moment of reflection is suddenly interrupted when Jude bursts through the door, calling out his name. The ladies are eager to see him, but instead of mingling, he is here, away from the crowd. Rather than responding right away, he looks at his friend's attire. How could he show up to the party dressed like that? He can't believe it. Meanwhile, Jude, clearly unbothered, runs a hand through his hair and asks how he looks. The reaction is immediate. He should just take it off. Yet, instead of listening, Jude dramatically places a hand on his chest and insists that fate brought this outfit to him. Ignoring the nonsense, Cesare questions why he would even pick something like that up. Is he struggling financially? Jude, however, simply moves on to another topic. He casually mentions that once his friend moves past Lady Lucrezia, maybe he could consider opening his heart to someone else. Then, as if by coincidence, he picks up a coat. He wonders if this could be fate. For a moment, Cesare considers the idea. Is he avoiding marriage because he fears ending up with someone as controlling as Lady Lucrezia? As Jude holds up the scarf, an inscription catches attention, KB, etched at the end. A thought immediately forms, assuming it belongs to someone familiar. However, the real surprise comes when a Catherine Bonaparte is spotted using items that once belonged to Adele Bibi's mother. The question lingers, how did this even end up here? The sky certainly didn't drop it. With a growing sense of urgency, the next question arises. Where did Jude even find this? Now, back to the present moment where the tension reaches its peak. Standing at the edge, our female lead finds herself in a life-threatening situation. A maid, one who has been beside Lady Lucrezia, suddenly pushes her off. Just as she starts to fall, quick reflexes kick in, and she grips the edge of the wall, barely hanging on. Desperation fills her voice as she recognizes the maid and recalls seeing her with Lady Lucrezia. The realization strikes. Was this all planned? However, there's no time for questions. Urgently, she demands to be pulled up, making it clear that she'll hold her master responsible for this act. Yet, the maid hesitates, stammering in fear. The thought of disappointing her lady causes clear distress, but Adelaide wastes no time in pointing out the harsh reality. If she truly believes that Lucrezia will protect her after this, then she is nothing but a fool. The truth is undeniable. Once this act is done, there will be no escape. Silence must be kept, and Lucrezia won't risk leaving behind a loose end. The words hit hard, and for a moment, shock crosses the maid's face. However, panic takes over, and she refuses to believe it. Holding her head in distress, she screams in denial, unwilling to accept that her lady would turn on her. Fear then twists into something darker. With a sudden burst of rage, she stomps on the fingers gripping the wall and repeatedly screams for our female lead to fall, to simply disappear. Her actions turn ruthless as she pushes with her legs, forcing the last bit of grip away. And just like that, our female lead plummets. Yet, in a twist of fate, she doesn't hit the ground alone. Cesare Bonaparte, the youngest sparrow and the esteemed head of the Bonaparte family, intervenes just in time. The moment of impact is intense, but instead of a painful crash, she lands on top of him. He ends up flat on the cold stone floor, staring up at the sky, as if fate itself had played a role in this moment. As if breaking out of a daze, he slowly sits up, rubbing his head. A familiar voice escapes, filled with concern. Was she all right? A quick scan assures him that she doesn't seem injured, though the shock in her eyes is evident. And then an awkward realization settles in. Without warning, a comment is made. If she doesn't want him touching her in a certain way, then she should stop touching his chest first. The words snap her out of it, and she quickly removes her hands, standing up in embarrassment. He, however, finds his thoughts drifting elsewhere. A troubling question forms in his mind. Was someone trying to take advantage of her again? The concern lingers as she steadies herself. The moment she stands, her eyes dart upward, urgency returning. A sharp realization sets in as she speaks. This wasn't an accident. The push had come from a girl in a Bunapart maid's uniform. The revelation hits hard. Someone had lured her in with a lie, claiming he had called for her. At that moment, confusion flashes across his face. Had he called for her? The absurdity of the situation becomes clear, and as he glances up, she states what they both now suspect. The maid, she belongs to Lucrezia. Jude rushes to the rooftop, his breath heavy as he looks down from above. He quickly reports that the suspect was too fast, slipping away before he could catch up. However, Cesare, standing on the ground below, questions why he even ran up there in the first place, pointing out that the suspect would have already been gone. Jude struggles to hear, asking him to speak louder, but Cesare doesn't bother repeating himself. Instead, he turns toward our main girl, his eyes narrowing as he notices her appearance. Without hesitation, he asks if she plans to walk into his room looking like that. She looks down at herself, realizing her shawl is gone. She explains that it flew away in the wind, but he simply remarks that if it were some kind of weapon, it would have been lost just as easily. She insists it was urgent, yet he challenges her, asking if she would always act without thinking just because someone told her to hurry. Feeling self-conscious, she tries to cover herself. Meanwhile, he watches her closely, unable to tell what she's thinking. His mind races, trying to make sense of it, but he finds no answers. Eventually, he stands up, removes his coat, and places it over her shoulders. Running a hand through his hair, he looks at her as she turns slightly and thanks him. Just then, a sharp pain shoots through his back, and before he can react, he collapses onto the ground. His hand grips his lower back as he struggles to process the sudden discomfort. She quickly turns, her voice filled with concern, as she asks if he's hurt. However, he can't help but think about the situation. She's the one exposed, yet she's worrying about him. A faint smile tugs at his lips as he wonders if she has forgotten how he once stepped on her foot. Instead of answering directly, he leans in slightly and teases her, questioning if she would personally treat him if he admitted to being in pain. His face draws closer to hers, the tension thick in the air. But just before anything else can happen, Jude bursts into the scene, rushing toward them in a panic. He calls out both their names, asking if they're all right. However, as he slows down, his eyes widen as he realizes what he just interrupted. The moment is immediately cut short, and Cesare wastes no time shifting the focus. Without hesitation, he instructs them to head to his office. Later in his office, he sits with his shirt off as the doctor tends to his injury. After a quick examination, the doctor reassures him that the injuries aren't too serious. However, he warns him against any strenuous activity and, to Cesare's dismay, advises him to stop smoking for now. Holding a cigarette in his hand, he responds with a casual remark, though it's clear he has no intention of following that advice. The doctor then hands him some medicine, explaining that it must be applied daily, starting the next day. However, Cesare immediately refuses any extra help, insisting that they should just send the supplies instead. His response catches the doctor off guard, but after a moment, the man relents and simply agrees. Previously, our female lead watches everything unfold, trying to make sense of the situation. In her mind, she reflects on how she had no choice but to follow the maid despite her suspicions. Suddenly, Epony rushes into the room, looking flustered. She had been searching for the young master since the lady went missing, but now she is taken aback by what she sees. Cesare, seeing the perfect timing, finishes putting on his clothes before turning his attention to her. Without wasting a moment, he demands an explanation. Epony quickly bows, apologizing for her shortcomings. She had been confused by the chairman's unexpected request for another report, but in the end, it was all because of Madame Flavia. At the mention of that name, Cesare, with a cigarette resting between his lips, responds without hesitation. There had been no reason to doubt them. As he speaks, Gigi enters the room, bringing more news. The knights have been ordered to lock Madame Flavia up, and any attempts to escape have been stopped. Our male lead then asks if the galley is ready, and upon confirmation, he presses his cigarette against the plate and makes his decision. Madame Flavia will be sent away, and now, it is time to bring in Lucrezia. Moments later, a knock echoes through the room. Outside, Lucrezia announces her arrival. Adelaide, observing everything, realizes something is off. In this place, knocking is not a simple courtesy, it is a warning. Entering Cesare's room without knocking is the norm, so this must mean something different. Cesare, leaning against the table, acknowledges her arrival before heading toward the couch. Adelaide watches closely, already knowing the reason behind the unspoken rule. Knocking signals danger, giving the one inside time to prepare. Without delay, he calls Adelaide to sit beside him. She follows his command, moving closer as Lucrezia steps inside. The moment she crosses the threshold, she calls out his name. In response, he greets her with a formal blessing, addressing her as the daughter of Della Valle. However, he acknowledges that the situation is far from ideal. As he speaks, Lucrezia's eyes widen, clearly taken aback by what she sees. Previously, we saw Lady Lucrezia arrive standing beside our male lead. She glances at Adelaide, who is right next to him, before he breaks the silence. He tells her not to just stand there and invites her to take a seat. Without hesitation, she responds, agreeing quickly, while he releases a small smile. Meanwhile, our main girl shifts her focus and immediately notices something unusual. The maid following Lucrezia is someone different. Her eyes widen as she realizes the switch has already been made. Cesare, not one to let things slide, turns his attention to Lucrezia and asks if this has always been her maid. Without hesitation, she confirms that the girl behind her is indeed her servant, introducing her as uneasy. However, he isn't convinced. He questions it further, making it clear that he doesn't believe her claim. Lucrezia, maintaining her composure, insists that this girl has always been her maid. To prove her point, she turns around and asks uneasy directly. Without missing a beat, the maid affirms the statement. His expression doesn't change. He comments on how quick and efficient she is, making a remark that she would be a perfect business partner if only they weren't bound by the pressure to marry. Lucrezia, unable to hide her nervousness, feels a drop of sweat sliding down her face. She stammers as she thanks him, but he picks up on her unease. He questions her response, wondering if she's truly grateful for his words. In a shaky voice, she confirms that she is, though our main girl watches closely. From the look on her face, it becomes clear that all thoughts of harming her have completely vanished. Instead, her mind is now filled with something, or rather, someone else. The sudden shift in focus is anything but normal. Lucrezia, perhaps in an attempt to change the subject, asks Cesare if he is hurt. He doesn't respond immediately. Instead, he turns his gaze toward Adelaide and leans in closer. Then, without warning, he makes an unexpected remark about catching a mermaid that fell from above. The meaning behind his words is clear. He's referring to her. As if that wasn't enough, he presses a light kiss against her head before asking if she's feeling better. His words hold a deeper meaning, suggesting that he would rather endure hardship himself than watch her suffer. Our female lead, surprised but not entirely displeased, responds in a way that shows her concern. She doesn't want to see him hurt either. Lady Lucrezia watches the exchange between Lord Cesare and Adelaide, her eyes widening as the conversation unfolds. She seems lost in thought until she hears her name, Lady Della Valle, being called by Lord Cesare. Snapping out of her thoughts, she begins to respond, but before she can finish, he interrupts. Without hesitation, he reassures her that it isn't her fault, and there's no need for her to concern herself with it. He then adds that his sister is more than capable of taking care of him, making it clear that he doesn't need any extra assistance. As he speaks, he places his hand across his sister's arm, a simple yet firm gesture. However, Lucrezia doesn't seem convinced. She remarks that a pretty lady being seen alone with him in a room could easily lead to a misunderstanding. This amuses Cesare, who laughs before clarifying that the woman beside him is his younger sister, Lady Della Valle. He then casually mentions that he found it unfortunate that she was set to marry Lucrezia's brother, which immediately catches Lucrezia off guard. Her eyes widened even more at his words. But just as the mood seems to shift, his tone takes on a more serious edge. He warns that he will let the matter go this time, but if any underhanded tactics are played again, their families will face something far worse than just a simple disagreement. His words carry a clear warning, one that leaves no room for argument. Meanwhile, at the same time, guards stand outside a room, their presence making it clear that someone important is inside. Inside, Madame Flavia paces as she thinks. She is certain that Lucrezia must have failed in her plan, and worse, may have dragged her name into it. As she continues to dwell on the situation, the door suddenly opens. A hooded figure steps inside, making her stop in her tracks. The sight of this person makes her react instantly, her voice filled with surprise as she speaks. The figure, without hesitation, bows respectfully before revealing his identity. Pulling back the hood, he delivers a message that changes everything. In the name of the Bunapart family, Madame Flavia is asked to follow him. In the dead of night, a carriage moves swiftly along the dark road. Inside, Madame Flavia sits in silence, her hands bound as a guard secures a blindfold over her eyes. She struggles, her voice filled with urgency as she demands to know where they are going. However, the guard remains silent, unmoved by her pleas. She continues to call out, insisting that she must meet Prince Cesare and explain everything, but there is no response. As time passes, uncertainty creeps into her thoughts. Where could they possibly be taking her? A sinking feeling settles in as a dreadful realization dawns. Could it be the harbor? The mere thought sends a chill down her spine. Before she can dwell on it further, the carriage comes to a sudden stop. The blindfold is removed, and she is led outside. A figure stands before her, his presence unmistakable. He had been waiting. Without hesitation, she pleads, urging him to take her to the prince. She insists it was all a misunderstanding and that she had no choice, as she was threatened. However, Jude only offers a smile, raising a hand as he speaks. He questions her words, pointing out that revealing the lady's identity contradicts the claim of being under threat. With a knowing expression, he reminds her of omerta, the sacred rule of silence. It is an unbreakable oath binding nobles to secrecy. Anyone who dares to violate it faces severe consequences. At this, she begins to stammer, insisting that she merely hinted at something. However, the response is swift. With a finger resting on his cheek, he muses that the hint must have been quite detailed. Then, as if already losing interest, he turns away. Without another word, he shifts the conversation, speaking of the ship. It is an old gully built in 840. The supplies on board include flour, hard bread, salt, sugar, biscuits, and other daily necessities such as soup and candles. As he gestures toward the vessel, he states that with these provisions, she can make the journey to Soriuk alone. The weight of his words crashes down on her. Soriuk, the farthest place from Santnar. If she were to board an aging ship like this, even the smallest wave could capsize it. Her eyes widen in horror. Jude, unmoved by her distress, continues. If she returns safely, the Lord will take it as a sign of the sea goddess's will and grant her forgiveness. Yet, she knows the truth. A ship without a goddess statue is cursed. Blessing it is impossible. The voyage is a death sentence. Without another moment's delay, Jude turns to another man. The explanation is complete, and it is time to set sail. We witness Madame Flavia's desperate struggle as she was dragged toward the boat by Aegir, the guard. Her pleas for mercy echoed through the air, but Jude simply watched without a hint of sympathy. She begged for another chance, hoping to meet the prince just once, yet her cries went unanswered. Instead, Jude smiled, waved, and sent her off with a warning about the sea goddess's jealousy. In her final moments, she clung to one last justification, insisting that everything she did was for the prince, for Bonaparte. However, the sea showed no mercy, swallowing the path beneath her feet and taking her along with it. Now, in a different part of the story, we find Epony tending to a weak and disoriented Adelaide in the bath. As she gently arranges her hair, she assures her that, fortunately, there are no serious injuries. However, Adelaide's mind is elsewhere. She immediately asks about the maid who pushed her, and Epone reveals the grim truth. The maid was discovered in a nearby sewer, her face mangled beyond recognition. The only identifying feature was her hair, matching the description given earlier. Her clothes had been stripped, likely to remove evidence, and a deep stab wound marked the same spot where Adelaide had been injured. The realization sinks in. This was no coincidence. A silent vow takes root in her mind. If someone dared to harm the person she cares about, there would be consequences. Shifting her focus, she inquires about Miss Lucrezia. However, despite suspicions, there is no solid evidence against her, making it impossible to impose any official punishment. Epone explains the difficulty of acting against someone so well regarded. Lucrezia is beloved by the commanders, admired in social circles, and known for her intelligence and contributions to powerful families. Any action against her could shake the balance. While Adelaide might feel frustrated and upset, she chooses not to push the matter further, simply nodding in understanding. To lighten the mood, Epone shares some good news. As she pours soup into the bath, she mentions that there will be no training for a while. The master has ordered a review of everything learned so far, allowing a period of rest. Hearing this, Adelaide immediately thinks of Madame Flavia and asks about her fate. Epone confirms that a replacement etiquette instructor is being recruited, but due to the Lord's busy schedule, the process is delayed. Classes will resume once Orkanina's envoy departs. This confirms her suspicion. Madame Flavia has been dealt with. As Epone prepares to leave, she casually asks when Adelaide would like to change into her going-out clothes. The unexpected question catches her off guard. When she hesitates, Epone reminds her of her new responsibility, taking care of the Lord. Confused, she repeats the words, almost as if trying to process their meaning. A few minutes later, the scene shifts to a dimly lit room where Duke Cesare reclines on the bed, his arms crossed behind his head. A small, knowing smile plays on his lips as he acknowledges his visitor. With a soft chuckle, he greets her, referring to her as his young sister. In her hands, she carries a tray with medicine, prepared for what comes next. In the next scene, we see our female lead walking towards Cesare. She moves towards the couch, carrying a tray in her hands. As soon as she reaches the table, she gently places the tray down and then turns her attention toward him. Her eyes linger on his wounds. And she finally speaks. However, before she can finish her words, she notices him sitting up, the bandage still wrapped around his waist. As her gaze travels over him, she takes in his broad shoulders, which taper down to a narrow waist. His muscles are marked with scars, each one telling a silent story of his dangerous past. However, one particular mark catches her attention. Just above the bandage, on the side of his waist, a clear scar stands out. Before she can process her thoughts, he shifts slightly and looks at her. A smirk plays on his lips as he points out that she has been observing him for quite some time. Caught off guard, she stutters, questioning herself in her mind. Is she crazy? Before she can form a proper response, she hurriedly says something to cover up her reaction. However, Cesare seems to find amusement in her flustered state. He casually remarks that he knows he looks good and playfully warns her not to get too excited over such a pleasant sight. Unbothered, she quickly shuts down his teasing, assuring him that it won't happen. He accepts her response without a fuss, then turns away and lays down, facing the bed. As she watches him, she turns toward the table where the medicine is placed. A thought crosses her mind, and she voices it aloud. Why is he letting her treat him when she isn't even a professional? Without hesitation, he responds, explaining that going elsewhere would be noisy and that a certain someone would only act annoyingly. Furthermore, he reminds her that he was wounded because of her, so shouldn't she take responsibility? Deciding not to argue, she picks up the necessary items and announces that she will start by cutting off the bandages. Holding the scissors firmly in her hands, she carefully snips away at the fabric. However, as she works, a strange feeling washes over her. A nervous energy builds within her, making her feel as though she is in the presence of a beast. Pushing the thought aside, she reaches for the medicine and informs him that she will now apply it. As she takes a closer look, she realizes that the bruise is far larger than she expected. The injury extends from his back all the way to his side. Without thinking, she reaches out and lightly touches the affected area. Her fingers brush against his skin as she carefully applies the medicine. At that moment, she realizes a problem. She cannot properly reach the wound on the inner side. Without hesitation, she calls out to him, addressing him as elder brother, and asks him to shift slightly so she can reach the spot. However, he refuses. His response is firm, and he makes it clear that he doesn't want to move. She tries again, requesting just a small adjustment, but he remains stubborn. Even when she asks once more, his answer does not change. He simply refuses to do it. In the previous scene, Adelaide steps closer, her eyes glancing at the bed. She hesitates for a moment before asking if she can sit there for a while. Cesare smiles at her, telling her she doesn't need permission for something like that. With a small nod, she thanks him and carefully moves to sit on the bed. As she settles down, her fingers lightly touch his wound. Almost instantly, he reacts, his voice carrying a warning as he tells her to stop teasing him. Without giving her a chance to respond, he swiftly turns her around and presses her against the bed. In the process, the tree holding the medicine tumbles to the ground. Holding her hands above her head, he leans over her, his weight keeping her in place. At this moment, thoughts rush through his mind. He remembers the day she fell from the rooftop, a moment when no one asked if she was okay. Yet, even when she was ignored, she never seemed to think it was unfair. Instead, she had looked at him with concern, as if his well-being mattered more than her own. How could she be so clueless? If it wasn't for him, she wouldn't have survived, and yet, she still worried about him. Doubt creeps into his thoughts. There must be another reason behind her actions. She came to see him dressed in those clothes, acted like she cared more about his injury than herself, and even made herself seem vulnerable by trembling like that. Only now does he start to understand what she might be trying to do. Otherwise, why would she worry about someone who had once stepped on her injured foot without a second thought? As he remains over her, Adelaide finally speaks, calling him elder brother. His gaze darkens as he tells her to call him by his name instead. He doesn't want to hear that title when they are like this, yet she repeats it, confused by his actions. A slow smile forms on his lips as he tells her to stop pretending to be innocent. With a firm grip, he intertwined his fingers with hers. He reminds her that he is a man and she is a woman. The more he looks at her, the more he realizes that she is quite pretty, and even her foolishness seems endearing. Leaning closer, he tells her to stay still and act as if she doesn't know anything. With his face now just inches away, the moment between them grows even more intense. If you're eager for the next chapter, drop a comment expressing your interest in a part 3. Don't forget to subscribe and ensure to hit the notification bell to stay updated. Until next time.